Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Wait Just an Infosec. I'm Sadie Gauthier. I'm going to be your guest host for today. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you for everybody at SANS for allowing me to do this. So first of all, where is everybody from? How you doing? It's Tuesday. We're after Labor Day. We're rolling back into it. We're going to get excited. Today, we're going to talk about CryptOSINT with my friend and OSINT expert, Nico Dekens. And then later on in the show, we're going to talk about some DFIR extraction on the Meta Oculus VR device with my friend and DFIR expert, Moran. Oh, we got people rolling into the chat. We got someone from Denver. Hello. Oh, another Colorado. We got a fan club happening in Colorado. Excellent. Oh, Michigan, Maryland. Oh my gosh, Nigeria, France. This is so exciting. Look at all the terrestrial users. Any extraterrestrial viewers in the audience? No, not yet. Wow. Hello, everybody. North Carolina. Well, thank you all for coming. We're very excited to get this show started. Toronto. So if anybody has ever heard of using cryptography and OSINT, that's going to be a huge topic. So get excited for our question of the week coming up soon. We got Netherlands, Spain, India. Oh my gosh, you guys are killing me. These are all places I've always wanted to go. Awesome. Well, hello, welcome. Oh my gosh, it's my first time hosting this podcast. I'm very excited to see you all. Oh my gosh. Oh my God, we're worldwide, people. We are worldwide. Wow. Just like mathematics, which is the underpinning of cryptography, we're going live in universal. It's a universal language. It really is. Well, we're so excited for you all to be here. Norway. Wow. London. These are all amazing. Excellent. We're going to let people gather in for a little moment before we fully get into the program. Kenya. Wow. This is so awesome. I myself am based in Boston, Massachusetts. Go Red Sox. New Jersey, Kazakhstan. Wow, thank you all for coming. This is so exciting. From Paris. I actually speak a little French. I used to know more in high school, but now I just read the newspaper in French. It's pretty amazing to see the amount of people we reach during these podcasts. So thank you again all for coming. I'm so excited to hear your feedback on a lot of these topics. Nico Dekens and I will be introducing a new concept called CryptOSINT, and we're really excited to get everyone's feedback. It's kind of a new topic in the cybersecurity realm. Also, after this, presentation, if you want to, keep engaging in that conversation, use the hashtag CryptOSINT, which is the title of this podcast, and hopefully we can get that rolling. Hello to Brazil, hashtag CryptOSINT. People are already using the hashtag. Great. So excited. From Brazil, Palestine. Wow. Some of you, it must be very, very early or very, very late. So thank you, especially for tuning in. There it is, hashtag CryptOSINT. Oh, from Chicago. Hi, Jim from Chicago. Awesome. Iran. Wow. Wow. We are getting excited. All right. We're going to kick this show off. Thank you all for tuning in and for commenting. I'm amazed at the reach that this podcast gets to. It's truly a testament to cybersecurity and how dedicated you all are to it. So let's get in. We're gonna do a News Bites segment with Thomas Wolf and Michelle Peterson. So we're gonna talk about the top stories from this week in cybersecurity. Let's take it away.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Wait Just an Infosec News Bites. I'm SANS editorial contributor Michelle Peterson, here with my colleague, Thomas Wolf, and we're going to discuss some of the cybersecurity news that we found the most interesting this past week. Thomas, hello.
Hey, Michelle, how are you doing?
Good. I am ready to dive in. Okay, the first one that I think is very interesting is the news that the U.S. Federal Trade Commission is investigating OpenAI. And the reason I think it's interesting, as most people out there probably agree by now, it's everywhere. It can't be escaped. It was the first one to really come out onto the market as far as this generative AI trend, and then left all the other players scrambling to kind of catch up. But let's go into what they are looking into. So the investigation, according to the civil investigative demand sent to OpenAI, the FTC is seeking information about personal data, and that includes what information it collects, its data retention practices, the methods for individuals to opt out of having their data collected, or the methods to request that their data be deleted, as well as how the personal information is being kept out of training data, policies and procedures regarding potentially false or misleading AI-generated statements about people, and information about OpenAI's data security practices and security incidents. The Washington Post calls this investigation expansive and is, I want to say, let me look for my quote. It is, the quote from the Washington Post is, "The agency's demand for OpenAI's documents marks the company's greatest threat to date," which sounds very dramatic, but it does sound like they are really digging in. And I think that this FTC investigation really comes down to determining whether OpenAI's data security practices violate consumer protection laws. We've heard so much about like GDPR, and California has its own, and I don't think those sort of regulations are going to be stopping anytime soon. People are more concerned with their privacy than ever. So it's really interesting to see this come into this realm for me. And I'm curious to see what they find out.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what sort of teeth the FTC has behind this investigation. I've actually been looking at a Citrix story. Citrix NetScaler systems are being hit with ransomware attacks again. We've been following this story for several weeks, actually, since researchers first noticed the NetScaler vulnerabilities being exploited about 3-4 weeks ago. Citrix released fixes in July, and so this is only happening to unpatched devices. So a word of advice to those with NetScaler devices out there: go to the Citrix website, download the patches, apply the patches, because researchers have noticed a new wave of ransomware attacks targeting these flaws. So Michelle, folks have been warned. This is really big. Ransomware is huge. It's getting bigger every day. They just released a huge global report about the exponential increase in ransomware. So this is a very prescient story, and anybody with these Citrix devices really needs to look out and patch immediately.
For sure. Speaking of ransomware, there was another item from News Bites this week that there has been a report, the 2023 State of Cyber Insurance report from Delinea, that shows that the cyber insurance policy costs have gone up 50 to 100%, which is quite a hike. And I think that actually puts such a nice little emphasis on, ransomware is not going anywhere. Costs of cyber crimes going up. These problems are only getting worse. And, it's just going to escalate more. And I think now we're seeing these costs that they've been talking about in businesses trickling down to insurance premiums. So.
Yeah, I was reading an article about this in Dark Reading this morning, and I couldn't help but chuckle at a quote in the article that basically said the increase is due to insurers not understanding the prevalence of cybersecurity incidents or the cost to restore and recover from them until they had to pay out for a bunch of them. So I sort of got a kick out of that story.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a wrap for our News Bites today, folks. Don't forget that you can find more critical cybersecurity news and commentary by subscribing to SANS News Bites newsletter. do that by going to sans.org/newsbites, and it's a twice weekly newsletter. Thanks again. We hope to see you again next week. Take care, folks.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Michelle and Thomas. That was a really interesting topic, and also a good reminder, apply the patches. I know you're constantly inundated with that command to, but do it. Really patch your systems. All right, so next up, we're gonna move to our question of the week, which is, I think, a really good one. And while I'm introducing it, I realized I was so excited about this talk, I forgot to introduce myself. So here's the question. Why should all cyber analysts know the fundamentals of cryptography? So feel free to join us at slido.com, enter this code, or you can use the QR code right there on the screen and give us some of your feedback. So what do you guys think? Why should they? Why is this an important topic for everybody, not just for the code breakers? So definitely drop your comments below. And some of my background real quick. So I am Sadie Gauthier. I'm also known as the Real STEM Sadie. Yes, it is a rap reference. So I used to be a cryptanalyst at the National Security Agency, at the NSA, for a while. And then I moved to SANS. So I work at SANS now as a courseware engineer. And I love every minute of both jobs that I did. So definitely hoping to bring some of this this cryptography into SANS a little bit more. So it's exciting to see your answers. Oh, we're getting some in now. It does factor so much into our daily work. So definitely when I bring on my next guest, Nico, we'll talk more about how everyday things use cryptography. So very good point. Very good point. Awesome. So keep getting those answers in. We want to see as many answers as we can, because this is really about what you guys think. What is important to you as a cyber analyst of knowing the fundamentals of security? Why should we know them? Awesome. All right. This is a great time since we're talking about cryptography and we're talking about OSINT. So that's where we got the name CryptOSINT, right? Cryptography. I know a lot of people, when they hear crypto, they think cryptocurrency, but in this episode, we're going to talk about it as cryptography or cryptanalysis, and OSINT, open source intelligence. So as a plug also, so SANS, they have blessed me, because it is my birthday, with the OSINT Summit. So definitely make sure that you attend the OSINT Summit. It's live online, it's free, it's this Friday. It is a great way to learn all of the amazing things that people are doing and all the research that's going into open source intelligences, which, as we all know, is a very hot topic right now. So definitely check that out and join me, because I'll be there, with a party hat on. All right, awesome. Excellent. Let's see if we have any more. Risks cannot be evaluated correctly. That is a very good point. That is a very good point, because without knowing how cryptography works, or anything works really in cyber, we don't know how to mitigate it. We don't know how to protect against attacks. Privacy is a top business priority. That's a great point. A lot of the times we talk about cryptography in terms of code breaking, but we also can talk about it in terms of authentication, which is huge, as everybody might know on this call. This is going to be this Friday. Sorry, this Friday, September 8th. Nope. Is it? Yeah, I believe it's the 8th. Yes. Foundational knowledge, good concept clearance, excellent. These are all really great. Keep them coming, because we are going to kind of reference these and talk a little bit more to them as we go on. Awesome. All right, I think it's time to bring on our guest, our first guest, Nico Dekens, also known as the Dutch OSINT guy. Hey, Nico, how are you?
Hey, everybody. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. We're excited to have you. He's an OSINT expert, and we've actually been working on this topic of CryptOSINT. So, Nico, do you mind introducing yourself for those of the people who don't know you in the audience?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Nico Dekens. If you want to look me up online, you have better chances looking for Dutch_OSINT guy, because that's my username. Well, I'm Dutch. I like open source intelligence, OSINT, and I'm a guy. So that's where my username came from. And I've been in, let's say, intelligence collection for almost 30 years now, or even longer. Started with the Dutch government. detective, analyst, then did some more clandestine, secretive stuff, counterterrorism work a lot of CSAM work. Moved over to Bellingcat, that also is an online journalistic collective, and now I currently work for a company called Shadow Dragon as the Director of Intelligence and Collection. And of course, I'm part of SANS because I offer one course, the SEC 587 Open Source Intelligence course, that's the advanced course, and I teach the other one, which is the 4971, which is the practical open source intelligence course. So basically, to sum it up, all I do is OSINT. I have no hobbies. I have no life. This is my life. But I love my life, and I love talking about OSINT. And today, I think we're going to talk about a topic that is heavily overlooked and underestimated. So CryptOSINT. So that's the short version of Nico.
Awesome. Well, thanks for introducing yourself. Nico, again, I may have misinformed the users, so I'm sorry about that. But when is the OSINT Summit? Is it the 22nd?
The 22nd of September, yes. I'll be co-chairing it together with Matt Atkinson, a fellow SANS instructor and overall awesome dude. So yeah, definitely sign up. September 22nd, the OSINT Summit.
Awesome. I don't know why I thought it was this Friday, but it is the 22nd.
Yep.
Awesome. So let's get into CryptOSINT. So Nico, when we first spoke, I mean, through SANS, we met and I QA'd one of your OSINT classes, which again, if anyone is interested in OSINT, definitely reach out to SANS and take these courses because they're very great about getting that fundamentals down. But did you foresee anything in that class that had cryptography in it? Is there any crypt in that course so far, or?
Well, if you're a cryptography purist, then probably the answer is not satisfying. But for example, a lot of the URLs nowadays are what we call base 64 encoded, which makes it nearly impossible for a human to read what's inside there. But if you can decode that, then all of a sudden you can see normal URL structures again, which you can very often somewhat change to find other openly available information. So from that perspective, yes, we definitely, within the courses that I teach and also that I offer, we work a lot with cryptographic hashes, hashing of files, deciphering or decoding certain things to add context or get a better understanding of information. So yes.
Awesome. That's a very good point too. And I'm guessing that the comment section is blowing up, or it should be, because there is point of contention is encoding cryptography. But in this case, I think you're right. I think it is because again, what is cryptography, right? It's obfuscating something or encoding something that you don't want people to know about, right? So, and that's kind of what we discuss in our first couple blog posts.
Yes, correct. Yeah. I think so. You and I, we wrote a blog that is hosted on my personal webpage, so you can visit that at dutchosintkai.com. Shameless self-promotion for us both, Sadie. So we did two blogs, and the first one is cryptography and OSINT, the fundamentals, where we go into, I think, the fundamental principles. What is it? So from a purist perspective, but also from a practical perspective, what could you encounter in a daily basis? So we go into the very basics of, hey, how can you encode something into something else with what they call those rotational ciphers, which you basically up a couple of letters in the alphabet, you take a word, you up it every letter 3 words, and then you get, let's say, a word which no one can read unless you know how to decode, decipher it. So that's a way how, for example, criminals communicate, and they still do that. And that's something that in my daily investigations I come across. But other things that particularly you, because you have by far way more knowledge than I do when it comes to cryptography. I was not a cryptanalyst, but I know some basic principles of it is, for example, communication through pictures. So if you have a picture of something meaningless or something very important, you could hide text in that picture, which you cannot see in the picture because it's stored somewhere within the data that you cannot see. And the only way to extract that data is basically to know how to extract it with a specific cryptographic algorithm, which is something that we also discuss in that blog. And that's something that I've seen happen very often. I've seen criminals communicate, telling them where to pick up, for example, narcotics, or I've in the child abuse material world, they use that very often to reference where to look online or find that very horrific content. So yeah, it's very common and it's almost everywhere, and it's pretty hard to detect unless someone tells you what to do. So there are many ways for you to look at this concept from an open source intelligence perspective to say, okay, there could be, for every piece of information in essence that you collect, so text, pictures, video, files, it could contain something that is hidden in there. But it's your task to figure out how to unravel that and how to find that information. And there are numerous techniques and tools out there that could potentially help you do that.
That is a great point and great summary of what we talked about. And I think that, like you said, this is a novel concept in that as a cryptanalyst, a lot of the times we're dealing with data that is static, right? It's somebody gives you something and says, this looks random, can you break it? And that's kind of what the cryptanalyst bread and butter is. But with OSINT can also help cryptanalysis, right? Because, say you don't know a password that is being used to generate a key that's used in cryptography, can you use open source intelligence to learn more about the person, right? Get more of their information, get a more educated guess on what type of crypt they might be using based on, the applications they're using. Steganography, as someone mentioned in the chat. Yes, Laura, that's exactly what we were talking about. Steganography in the pictures. So all really, really good points. And it's great to hear that you've seen this, because a lot of the times I think it's hard to hear about these cases, but it's nice to see that this is actually applicable and not just an exercise for the user. So Nico, we also talk about emojis. That was actually one of my favorite posts that we wrote about. So can you explain a little bit more about how you find some encodings in kind of the social media world with emojis?
Yeah, so well, officially, again, it's not really encrypting something. It's more like communicating in a different language. That's how I like to maybe reference it. But I've seen numerous occasions where people offer, let's say, illegal goods. So that's the second blog that we wrote that's on my page. So you can look it up at DutchOSINTguy.com at blogs, and you will see that blog called Cryptography and OSINT. Can you read emoji? So what we were getting at is that I'm scraping and monitoring all kinds of places. For example, a platform called Telegram, where there's a lot of, let's say, illegal activity going on in the forms of people selling drugs or other stuff. And they offer that with making use of a lot of these emojis. And these emojis have very specific meanings. So, for example, a box could mean we can give you a bulk order on something. Or we can see a little pill emoji that could mean, okay, I'm offering Molly ecstasy. Or a snowflake, meaning I can offer you cocaine. So there are many emojis that can be interpreted in a different way than they were originally supposed to be interpreted. And they are being used by certain groups to spread information. So, for example, what we could also see is during COVID is that people in the world that they had their vaccine jabs in the form of a carrot emoji next to their profile picture. So if you had one carrot, you had only one shot of the vaccine, two, and so on and so forth. So those are all things that could help you identify, let's say, people who are like-minded based upon the use of emojis. So it takes a while to get the hang of how to read emoji from, let's say, an open source intelligence and, let's say, a crypto aspect. You very often can see that in certain worlds. So again, to refer back to the child abuse world, you can see that very specific icons mean something to get into a place that is maybe not indexed by search engines like Google's. But in order to find that, you first of all need to understand how to search for certain emojis on, let's say, a search engine or in a social media platform, because that will lead or help you pivot into those posts that will give you invite links and other things. So there's a lot going on when it comes to emojis. And we were not even talking about the emojis that you have by default on your, let's say, your phone or your mobile device or something else. And we were also talking about emojis that you can make by using special characters on your keyboard. So you can use, on your keyboard, you can, for example, insert a swastika, which is basically a reference to a far right or maybe a Nazi right-wing orientated thought good. So that, again, is a great way to pivot into other places in the world. So I think by us discussing that, I think that really helped us get a better understanding of how we could do that. And you, of course, also chipped in with how we could use emoji and encryption. So Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on that? Because I could go into it, but it's not my field of expertise. So.
And again, I think the comments box post, but there are a lot, I won't say easy, but easier way.
I think your audio was a little bit strange, and now you're muted. So no worries. I think it had to do with a little bit of a throttling in the internet connection. So you should be back.
Can you hear me now?
No, you're a little bit. Or at least for me, you are breaking up. So well, maybe you can fix your line, and I will walk the people through this part. So basically, what you said in our blog post is that okay, we can search for these emojis normally through search engines and the search bars in the social media platforms. But what if we can hide communications in the form of emojis with making use of, let's say, specific code? So we created ciphers where you can give someone, let's say, a compliment, or you hide a secret message, and you can cipher that into another set of characters, which now a normal person will not be able to read. So you translate into UTF Unicode, and then you encode that emoji set. So let's say you have the smiley and you have something else, and then you want to convert that into something with that being a message. You can encode that into a UTF Unicode, and now all of a sudden it's unreadable. Of course, you need to decipher it with some kind of salsa 20 code thingy. So you're back. Maybe you can explain that.
Yes. So hopefully everybody can hear me now, and I'm coming in clear.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, so just as you said, Nico. So, and again, it's easier because, so in the blog post, we talk about using Python packages. And I think that that's really cool because if you're not used to coding with cryptography, it can be a little daunting, right? Because some cryptography purists often you see and you're at the bit level, right, when you're using data. And that can be really overwhelming to people who are newer. So the Python package that we use took that UTF, the Unicode encoding, and it basically maps it to a different bunch of symbols. And that's kind of what encoding is, right? It's all just mapping into something that's looks more gibberish than it was. So that's what we did. So basically we said, hey, Nico, if we're going to plan to, hide something, right? We're going to plan to encode something. We both need to agree upon the secret that only you and I know about. And so we did, and we said, okay, this is going to be our secret term or our secret. Think of it almost like a key. It's what it's called, but we also call it like, a password or something like that, or a seed. And basically we said, okay, we agree on this. And then we both used that to encode and decode messages back and forth. So again, cryptography is dependent on certain things. And as someone had mentioned in the comments and asked the question, is cryptography impenetrable, right? No, it doesn't always succeed because people make mistakes, and just as they do in OSINT, right? In order to make this the most secure thing possible, you should be picking a password that's got this many keys in it or this many characters. And people say, nah, I'm just going to press enter, right? That's going to affect the algorithm that those keys, those passwords go into, those cryptographic algorithms, and could cause some issues. So they either could cause, the encryption to not be as strong. They could also cause things to leak out. So this is what cryptanalysts really look for. They look for non-random things, right? And so a bunch of random text, if you see a bunch of characters over and over and over again, you say to yourself, that's not really as random as it should be if they're using really good encryption. And then that's kind of what we were talking about, right? And so once you see the emojis come back when you decode it, you're like, oh, those are emojis. And they're trying to say, oh, she's smiling and she's got an angel face on. So she's, maybe she's pretending like she's the good guy, right? That makes more sense than a bunch of strangled up characters. So that's kind of what we talked about, which was really, really fun. So let's go back to the answers to our question of the week, because there were some interesting concepts that I think you and I can kind of talk to about why people should know the fundamentals of cryptography to ensure compliance. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, when I look at this, risks and all that kind of stuff. So when it comes to risk, for example, maybe a practical example could be is if within open source intelligence, we very often download files that could contain meaningful information. So let's say I've got a task to protect my company, and our company was exposed, breached, or hacked, and that data set is now floating around on the internet. So I find that breach data set, let's say it's a JSON file, a JavaScript object notation file containing all kinds of credentials of a company that has been stolen. It has now been offered on a super secret form, so I collect that file. Then I find exactly the same file or the file name that has exactly the same file size in a social media platform. And then I find it somewhere else on the form. So now I supposedly have three exactly the same files, same file size. But now if we hash these files, so if we cryptographically turn these files in and basically generate a hash value, in this case, maybe a SHA-265 hash value, because that's maybe the current standard for most people who use it, we could see if they are consistent, if the data that's inside those files has not been changed or at least is exactly the same for all three files. And that could be a good assessment to do, because very often when I encounter breached or stolen or leaked data, there are little, let's say, antennas in there that will communicate with some company or country that you feel highly uncomfortable with, or that may nest in your computer in the form of a virus or a Trojan. So by purely doing that assessment and just trying to figure out, hey, these are supposed to be exactly the same files, but by comparing these hashes and seeing that there might be a difference, you might get an alarm. And with that, you could say, okay, I will only open these files in, let's say, a containerized environment, an air-gapped environment, maybe. So it really depends on, for me, it's mitigating risk, making sure that you don't take unnecessary risks, but also just making sure that all the files that you work with are consistent. And the same way that we do it is if we download something, we hash it, because very often we need to process and exploit that data in order to do something. So we generate our working file, and if that working file must be the same as the original, so we preserve the original data. And by comparing these hashes, we can at least show in court or somewhere else, hey, these two files are exactly the same. They are not tampered or hindered with by the investigator.
That's a very good point. It's also good in terms of thinking about attribution, right? If you know that this is from a specific target and you're seeing it on other systems and that hash value is correct. And again, hash values, so cryptographic hashes, and when Nico was talking about having standards, right? Those are the strongest that we really think of. And so what a cryptographic hash does is it takes a bunch of data and it generates this value, right? And that's supposed to be a one-to-one mapping. So no two files that are different should hash to that same value. And granted, there are collisions that do happen, but it's so statistically unlikely that there's just no way that it would happen in the wild. And so that's really, like you said, with the court cases, there's things like that. When you go to court, you could say that's when you can bring on a cryptanalyst or a cryptographer to really talk to how unlikely it is that file is anything other than what you think it is. So that's a really good point. So Nico, so if you're doing your OSINT research, and people, feel free to drop your comments below, how do you get assistance about anything cryptographic related? Who do you reach out to? Is there a community of CryptOSINT people? Like, what do you do?
That's a really good question. So luckily, I know some people, since I teach classes, there are some people in my classes that are cryptanalysts, and I know you, so I can reach out to people. But if I don't have that luxury, or people, since you are on the other side of the pond, I'm in the Netherlands, you're in the United States, sometimes you need to sleep, I can ask, for example, AI questions. So let's say I find a phrase or a value that doesn't make sense to me. I could literally copy and paste that value into any, let's say, AI or chat GTP orientated tool and ask it, hey, what is this value? Can you tell me what it is? And very often it will say, hey, it's an MD5 hash, or it's a SHA-265 hash, or it's a piece of Python code, or it's something else. So if I don't know what something is, or if I don't know how to deal with it, I can ask those tools questions. Of course, I'm an OSINT specialist, so I know how to find information on the internet. So do not underestimate the power of forums like Quora or Stack Overflow, where a lot of people ask questions that they stumble upon. And very often I find the answers that I'm looking for in those places by asking the correct question, or simply copy and pasting the values that I found into several search engines. So do definitely not limit yourself to let's say the most well-known search engine, Google, but also use Microsoft Bing or Yandex or DuckDuckGo, because you would be amazed that sometimes a certain search engine will not give you the information that you are looking for. Why? It simply did not index that information. So it will not give you that answer. So do not stop at the first search engine. Exhaust your resources. And of course, I like to position myself in, let's say, chat rooms or Slack rooms where there are field experts talking about the topic. And I can simply be the noob there because I know about OSINT, but I do not necessarily know a lot about cryptography. And I just ask a question there. And that's what I think, what I appreciate the most about the cyber and info security world is that people are so friendly and people are so willing to help if you are basically also yourself are willing to help. And that's something that I'm always willing to do. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question, Sadie.
It definitely does, and I think it also speaks to kind of what we were talking about. Like, let's all create this. I mean, I think the cybersecurity realm is really great about using Twitter and other areas to kind of connect all of these topics and to share information. So, you know, Nico and I are trying to get the hashtag CryptOSINT to go because we want a space where we can talk freely about how both of these concepts interact. And if anybody has seen crypt in OSINT, in their own cases. So definitely make sure that you comment in this chat. Nico and I are going to try to come back to a lot of these questions. So, because I see questions about AES, I see questions about quantum. So we'll try to get back to these questions as time permits. And after the program, you'll be able to see them. But again, use that hashtag CryptOSINT so that we can all kind of put some more love into this research topic. Because as you said, Nico, I think that I know that I can go to you for OSINT. You know you can go to me for crypt. But the average analyst isn't really going to know where to go. And hopefully also our blog posts will help with some of those fundamental concepts and some of the more interesting things, such as, one of the things I loved on your blog post was looking at crypt in audio. So those are more things that are more novel that people might be like, oh, I never really thought about all of these audio files that we talked about. So this is really exciting, Nico, and I'm excited to see all of the work and all of the comments. Hopefully all the viewers, if you guys have any experience with cryptography, if you have experience with OSINT or you don't, feel free to follow that hashtag, communicate with us. We really love this topic. We really invested in it, and we just want to see it grow. So Nico, do you have any parting thoughts for everybody?
No, I just want to invite people that are listening. Hey, if you have a topic, throw it at us and maybe we'll write a blog about it. That's my offer to the community. If you give us a good topic, well, we'll write about it.
That's right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nico. And thank you to our viewers for listening. It was great to have you. Awesome. All right. So our next topic, so we're going to pivot from OSINT to DFIR. For those who aren't familiar with those acronyms, we're going from open source intelligence to digital forensics and incident response. We're going to bring in one of my friends and DFIR experts, Brian Moran, to talk about some research we did on the Meta Oculus 2 VR headset. So Brian, hi, how are you? You're muted. Live streams.
I thought they could automatically unmute me. My bad. So hello there. So one thing I will start off with is this platform is pretty cool because I think this is the best that I've ever looked with any kind of filter ever. So like kudos to that algorithm. I appreciate that mathiness because God knows I need all the help I can get. So hello, I am Brian Moran for those who don't know me. I spent about 11 years in the Air Force. After that, got out, bounced around a couple of companies, finally started my own company back in 2014, and have been pretty much working in the primarily in the incident response space, but doing bits and pieces of digital forensics here and there, primarily doing research on new devices, new methods, new techniques, stuff like that. So about 5 or 6 years ago, we did a bunch of work with Alexa stuff. And this past year, we had the pleasure of working together and actually doing some of the research and kind of everything else with regards to the Oculus. So that now it's called the Meta Quest, but it's the Oculus, it's the virtual reality headset. So yeah, so that's I guess what we're going to talk about today. And I will say for everybody who's watching, there is very little math involved. Very little, any of the crypt stuff is pretty much completely out the window here. So we're going to talk more about kind of actual use cases and everything related to that.
Awesome. And yes, we are. And if you haven't met Brian or follow him on any of his adventures, you definitely should on social media. He loves a good adventure. So before we get started, definitely I'd like to ask the audience, and feel free to put it in the comments section. How many of you actually use Meta Quest Oculus devices, the VR headsets? I think that they're a relatively new topic. I mean, not as new as they were when they first came out, right? But we were focusing more on the digital forensics of it, and I think that the use case is really what was intriguing to us, right, Brian? Because most of the time you think about gaming, right? You're playing games and stuff, but there are some things on these headsets, like this application called Virtual Desktop, where you can interact in like an office setting and stuff like that. So do you want to speak to kind of that kind of use case we were looking at?
Yeah, so kind of like taking it all the way back. So it's sort of similar to how I got interested in the Alexa devices from Amazon. So a friend of mine had a headset, and I always was like, no, I don't really care about this virtual reality stuff. Like there's no way. Like it's not me. And she's like, no, try it. And I put it on, and I think that night I went out and bought one. I was just so impressed with like just how cool it was, and just kind of like, it's like, oh yeah, I can do a lot of things, but like it's primarily at the time it was limited to like gaming and Beat Saber, and there was some other like sort of like hop around exercise thing, and I was like, yeah, this is pretty cool. And then I started to use it kind of for other things that weren't necessarily gaming. Like one was an app called Trip VR, which is for like virtual reality, mental health, mental well-being, kind of like calming, soothing app, which in my opinion is like worth the cost of the device all by itself, because it just, every time I have a tough day or stressful day or something, I just put that on and go to my magical reality of some kind of, speaking about aliens earlier, some kind of like virtual planet thing, and just soothing, calming music. And it just, it's amazing. It's absolutely incredible. I don't know how they did it, but they did it really well. But then of course, like, have to create a Facebook account, it syncs with all of this stuff. I can see my Facebook friends on there and everything. And I was like, this is really interesting that this is one of those devices that seems to kind of seamlessly populate all of this information, but like, okay, but so of course, then the analyst part of me is like, oh, well, how does that get there? What can I do on what can I potentially do on this device that will show up in my Facebook account or my Instagram account or any of my, now it's all Meta related, but like, what can I do in there, and how can we get this data off of these devices? And then it's like, okay, well, this is super interesting, and nobody has really looked into this too much, outside of, there's been a couple of presentations like, oh, like use our really expensive tool and we can get data from it. And to be honest, if you have 20 grand to spend, like, oh yeah, sure, I'm going to put it into run the application and get information from it. But what if you don't have that, which is honestly majority of people? So that's kind of where we went from there, with just regards to kind of like, let's see what kind of information we can get from these devices, and let's actually use it, not necessarily in a pure gaming sense. Let's use it more of like, okay, let's actually put like 1Password on there. Let's put some actual like work augmentation stuff. And then I guess the proverbial term would be, we opened a can of worms that we did not expect to have happen there. So yeah, that was super interesting. And then it's like, oh, well, not that I would ever use this for anything malicious, but like, this is fairly easy to use for malicious purposes. And we kind of went down the rabbit hole of like, should we actually talk about this or not? And we decided we should talk about it. And that was what our presentation was, what, 5 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago? So, Austin.
Yes,
I don't remember how long ago it was, but it was Austin.
yes, at the DFIR Summit, this year's SANS DFIR Summit. That's right. And it's a very good point. And again, like for anybody listening, I think it was great to focus on these free and open source tools, right? Because then any of you who are watching this podcast can, join in with us on this research. And I'm so glad that you pulled me onto this project, because it really was an interesting project. So I don't see a lot of movement in the chat. So I don't think a lot of people are really using it for a business case. I saw someone mentioned that they were using it for gaming, which again is usually what we see. But for me, we actually looked at virtual desktop in particular because it was one of those top rated apps. And like you said, it's one of those things where like, why would you need this? Unless, and again, virtual desktop is so that you can log into your workstation from your VR headset and actually interact with that. So can you talk a little bit more about the kind of tests that we did on that?
Yeah, sure. So the virtual desktop app itself was, I think, like on the overall like paid apps, like it's in the top 10. It isn't number one. It's like number 8 or something like that. So it's fairly popular with Oculus or with MetaQuest users. Now, of course, like that is like a subset of a subset of a subset of a subset of the human population. So exactly how many people are using it and have downloaded and purchased that, like that would obviously be on, the application provider and potentially Meta themselves with regards to how many people actually use it. But, we were like, oh, well, like I can, spin up a desktop. I can set up everything to automatically configure it, everything. And then it was kind of like, oh, well, I don't actually have to really authenticate to the computer. All I have to do is run this application. All I have to do once the application is running is put a username in there, and then it will just like show up automatically on the Oculus device, wherever it is. And that the Oculus user can then just simply, wait for the pop-up to happen on their headset. They just click the computer, and then you're on the computer as the logged in user. And there is no evidence of any kind of additional authentication. There is no, there are no incidents in the event logs of any kind of like remote connections or anything like that, because for all intents and purposes, from the Windows perspective, everything is on the computer and running as that user, and that is essentially it. So it's kind of like, oh, you just run this application and you fill in a username, and once that user turns on their Oculus headset, they can do whatever they want as that user. So it goes back to kind of the questions of, well, like, okay, yes, I was on the computer, but no, I didn't take all of these documents, or no, I didn't access all of these sites, or no, I didn't do all of that. But when you're doing the investigation, it's like, well, actually, this user account did, in fact, do all of these things. And there's no evidence that somebody didn't. Like, it was just like, okay. But again, like, it's also like, we do want to clarify, like, we're not knocking the app developer. We're not knocking Meta, anything like that. Like, this kind of reminds me of back in the olden days when I was a young little child, probably about Sadie's age now, maybe a little younger, but like, it's when the internet was kind of sort of like the open Wild West, and everybody like just streamed everything that they wanted. They connected to computers. They shared music and files, and it was a glorious time. And then
simpler times.
Yeah, I know. Back when we had our AOL discs that we got in the mail, and had all of the AOL internet that we could ever possibly want. And like, that's kind of what it is. It's like, oh, well, like all of these gaming and streaming folks like can just connect and do all that. But also like from your own house, like you can remotely use your computer, kind of productivity, everything like that from the virtual reality headset. So like again, like I understand it, but like, God, I wish there was some logging or some additional, like just something else there that would be like super helpful for if you actually encounter that. And so, of course, we brought all these topics up at the summit, and 2 different people actually approached me after the talk and said, like, we actually had an incident where this was used in the environment, and it was the same thing as like, we knew something happened, but like there was no evidence. So like, of course, you know, like we're like, oh, like we don't want to use this for bad, but like we want to say like, you know, this could potentially be used for bad, and obviously it already is being used for bad. And it's really just as simple as you have to just run the application and fill in the username, and that's it. Like there is currently no additional authentication.
Yeah.
Now you can go into the settings of the application and like require some kind of like authentication notification or something like that. I don't remember what the exact settings are, but like that's not a default setting. Like the default setting is you run the application, you fill in a username, and that is it. So
Exactly.
I do see somebody ask the question: is the Oculus device interface with the computer being accessed? So the simplest way to describe how that works is essentially you have your headset, you click on the computer name, and then it brings you up like you're running the computer. Like it's essentially like a third monitor, except you control it with magical hand things rather than a mouse or anything like that. But it's literally that easy, and it's so simple to do. And right now,
as GM also mentioned, like you don't have to use a password. There's nothing that you, as the person on the using the virtual reality Oculus device, you don't have to do anything besides log into this app and boom.
Yep. Yeah. So the testing that we did on it was I spun up the computer, I filled in Sadie's username, and then I was like, hey, whenever you want to do it, you go ahead. And I remember she sent me a message and it's like, I think it's broken because like I just logged in and it didn't ask me anything. It's like, no, it's working right. Like that's literally how easy it is. So, but with also the caveats there is the application itself for the Oculus devices is limited to only 4 usernames. So you can't just send it to everybody in the world and just blankly fill in usernames. Like it only allows 4, but still that all it takes is one user who does something malicious, and that's kind of like game over.
Exactly. And I think that it was great because while our efforts were focused on digital forensics, we really leaned into the incident response, like Brian mentioned, because again, like I see people in the chat mentioning like this does seem like there's no password, yikes. And as Brian mentioned, that's because of the way that the app developers wanted to stream. But as Brian said, if there are no logs to tell us who has entered your machine, that's a problem. And as Brian mentioned, basically I had actually written a sticky note on Brian's desktop computer, and we're not on the same network or anything, but I was able to get into his network. And the only reason he really knew that I was there was because I said, hey, Brian, I was in there. And then he literally looked and he said, oh my God, there's a sticky note. That's the only reason how he knew. And he looked through all the logs and there was no mention that I was in there.
Yep.
So again, like you said, Brian, we really went back and forth about sharing this with you all in the community, but we wanted to make people aware that, people this device seems like it's aimed for people who are gaming, which is great, but a lot of, children use this for gaming. And so, you really need to think about how safe is your network using these kinds of devices, right?
Yep. Yeah. And, like there's obviously like everything like, oh, well, for the iPad, you give the iPad to the kids, you have to log in with a special code to make a purchase, everything like that. Like now they're like, oh, I can just go on the desktop and buy whatever I want from Amazon. Like, cool, I just spent $15,000 on all this random gaming stuff now. And like, oh, well, that looks like it was, the parent that did that. So I guess it's okay. Like, it's just this whole like, it's literally an infinite set of possibilities with what you could potentially do with this.
Exactly. And that was just one point of our talk that we gave. So, we're going to have to wrap this up here, but hopefully Brian and I are going to try to write some, blog posts to kind of detail how we went through the process of getting the data off the Oculus, because hopefully everybody who's here can use those, free and open source tools to kind of join us on this research journey as we look at more of these applications in depth for both the digital forensics side and that incident response side. Yep. Thank you, Brian, so much for coming on and explaining this to everybody. Your expertise is always appreciated, and you always crack me up with your. I love the shirt. I can't get over it.
It's that time. It's pharmaceutical cheese ball o'clock, so it's time to do it.
Well, thank you, Brian. Well, that was amazing. Both two incredibly smart, talented, and just personable guests that we had on this show. I want to thank everybody for coming because I think it was a really cool topic, and hopefully you all enjoyed both the OSINT and the DFIR side of this talk. And continue the conversations with me, Nico, and Brian later on. And in this chat, again, don't forget that this chat, please put your comments. Please, we're going to try to answer your questions as best we can. There's links in here to the different summits. Example, the OSINT summit, which is September 22nd. It was September 8th, but it had moved, so it is 22nd this year, and it's free. Again, virtual, online, free. The links are there. Join us. Let's talk more. Engage with us. Engage with the community, and I think we're going to push all of these research efforts forward. Very excited, and thank you to everybody at SANS for allowing me to host this episode. It was really, really fun, and it was amazing to see everybody who was chatting in our channel. So thank you all for tuning in. And also, if you enjoyed my banter or my chaotic nature, if you will, I will also be co-hosting with Stephanie, who hosted last year, the SANS Neurodiversity in Cybersecurity Summit in 2024. That's March 28th, 2024. That's another free live online event. And it's something that's really special to my heart. And we hope that we represent everybody in our cybersecurity realm. So thank you guys again for coming. Hashtag CryptOSINT. Don't forget. I want to hear everything that you encounter. Let's try to get all of these ideas together, and like Nico said and Brian said, contribute to research, and let's write blog posts about it. That's the one thing that leaving a government agency and coming into this world outside of those restrictions really was amazing to me, and it's special about SANS, right? Because you are able to interact with all of these experts and amazing minds, and everybody wants to talk to you and share ideas and help you learn. So don't be afraid to reach out, and I hope that you all have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. This is Sadie Gauthier, the Real STEM Sadie. Again, have a good week.